Hey, Cassie Garcia here with Sew and Grow Together, and today I'm going to show you something I just learned how to do and I'm really excited about, and that is how to make your own DIY beeswax wraps. So cool! Hey, and welcome! We are three families who come together to help each other grow in our faith, family, homesteading, and whatever else life throws our way. Join us on this journey as we sew and grow together. So what is the point of a beeswax wrap? This is something that you can use to replace plastic wrap or like cling wrap or foil that you might use to cover a bowl or dish or jar. Another thing you can use these wraps for is to wrap cheese. You can use it to wrap sandwiches. You can use it to wrap maybe you've cut open an apple and you want to wrap half of it, something like that, fruit. You can wrap all kinds of stuff. Anything that you would be using a plastic wrap for, you can use these. So what we're trying to do is replace some plastic, some things that we would be, number one, we would be wasting and throwing away. Also, we're just slowly trying to minimize plastic use in our home for, health reasons as well. We like to be sustainable, things that we can keep and reuse. And also, we just want to minimize chemicals that could be affecting our health as well. So, double win here. Plus, they're pretty. Aren't they so pretty? You can use all kinds of different fabric colors. And I'm going to tell you how easy it is to make them and how easy it is to use them. So, I've got my whole setup here. And I'm going to go over to the stove to melt some things. But this is basically it. And really, you don't even need all of this. But I'm going to walk you through it, and I'm going to show you how I'm making it happen. All right, so you use these. They're just basically a piece of fabric, the fabric of your choice. But they feel a little more stiff and just a little bit sticky, especially if you get it warm, like in your hands. So I might have these stored in a drawer flat. In between uses, I can wash them by just rinsing with cool water and maybe using just a little bit of soap. And again, rinsing with cool water. I'm going to talk about that. And then you can just hang it to dry and it will harden and be a little more stiff. So when you first pick up a new one or one that you haven't been using just really recently, you can actually just put it in your hand. It kind of sticks together, really, sticks together. Kind of sticks in a ball all together. And what you're doing here is just warming it in your hands and getting it ready. Then when you unravel it, when you open it back up, it's a little softer. And then you can put it on top of something and just kind of press it into place with your hands. And you have a sealed container. It works pretty much like plastic wrap, minus the plastic. So to start out, you will need a fabric. You're going to want to use 100% cotton. And if you're buying new fabric, you can be on the lookout for organic cotton if you want to get even more picky, which is what we are going to do. But for today, I raided my quilting stash that I've had forever and ever. I don't even know where this fabric came from. I know it's cotton, and pieces of it has been used in quilts. And I have a whole bunch of it. So I'm going to use some of this. And I'm going to be making 3 different sizes. And each of the different sizes, I'm going to make a different color so that for my own personal use, so I know when I'm grabbing one if it's small, medium, or large. And my largest one, I want to make sure it fits over the bowl that I use when I'm letting my dough rise, because I usually use plastic over that and I want to swap that up. But this is the color I'm going to use for the smaller ones. For my purposes, I have notes here, my sticky notes. I'm going to be making my small ones 8 by 7 inches, my medium size 10 by 11, and then the large 13 by 14 inches. And I'm probably only going to make 1 large, 3 medium, and maybe 4 or 5 of the small ones. And then I will have my complete set for my home use. Now, will they stay like this forever? No. But they should last, depending on how well you take care of them, how often you use them, they should last 6 to 12 months. And at the end of that time, if you don't want to mess with it, or if they've just gotten a little worn or ragged, or you're tired of them, compost them, burn them, whatever you want it to be, a good fire starter. Otherwise, if you do want to continue using it, you can melt up a little bit more of this and give it a little refreshing coat of what we're going to make today. Now, I have been looking into these for quite a while and gathering supplies, and I was a little bit nervous about making it myself. For one, I saw a lot of variations of recipes online, and I was a little nervous about how it would work. I love beeswax. We have our own bees. We're working on learning how to render our own beeswax the best way we can. I like the properties of beeswax. I like to use it in skincare and things like that. But I have seen where people, when they use only beeswax, which some people do, that it is much harder and is not very sticky. So it's really kind of difficult to get it to stick to the containers, which is what I want to use it for. These small beeswax pellets are much easier to melt than the larger chunks that you can buy in different places. But if you just have the larger pieces, you can use a grater. You can put them in the freezer and hit it with a hammer. I've done that before. It's still a little difficult, but it works. So there are people whose recipes only use the cotton fabric and beeswax. You can try, if that's what you've got, use it. That's awesome. There are 2 other ingredients that you can add that when mixed in make it a little softer and more pliable and a little stickier so that it's a little more user-friendly for what we actually want to use it. And one of them is pine rosin, which is really similar to pine resin. I had to look into the differences a little bit because on some recipes you'll see it listed as resin and others as rosin. Almost the same thing. They both come from a pine tree from the sap, and they're very sticky, where resin is liquid. It's very, very sticky, but it's a liquid. Once they've heated the pine resin to the point where it's removed some of the moisture and oils in it, it can harden. And they use this for stuff like you can get pine rosin for if you have an instrument that uses a bow for the bow strings. That makes it a little more sticky and it helps it have a better sound quality when you're using a bow. There are a whole lot of different uses, but it is a substance that is from pine trees. So while I would not want to sit and eat this, for one, it would really taste terrible and it would get stuck to your teeth and just so many things. It is not toxic. It probably would make you sick if you ate very much of it because it's just not one of those things that you sit and eat. But for it to come into contact with my food or anything like that is fine. It's beyond fine. There's nothing wrong with that. So we'll take it. And then jojoba oil. A little bit of jojoba oil in this recipe helps make the fabric soft and pliable. Great for your hands too. When I'm touching this, my hands get a little bit sticky, and that's from the pine. And actually, for what I'm going to do today, I'm going to use a little bit less of the pine rosin because I did feel that it was a little extra sticky, a little more than it needed to be. And when you smell it, it smells pretty pine. The rosin itself does not have much of a smell at all in its solid state, but when you melt it all together, it does give you a little bit of that pine scent, which is not bad, but it is a little strong and it's a little sticky. So I'm gonna take it down just a little bit with this recipe that we're using today. So how do you do this? That was my next question. How do I put this all together? I know I can cut fabric, although there's a trick to that too. But there were some different methods for putting it on the fabric, coating the fabric with it, and I'm going to show you my favorite one and what seems to work really well. So first of all, your fabric needs to be washed and dried. I want this fabric very dry. I do not want to seal moisture in and have to worry about something, molding or anything. It is washed and dried. And while this probably could be a little better, ironed a little better, it's a little bit wrinkly, but we're going to make it work. So pre-washed, dried. If you want to iron it out, make sure it's really good and flat, and then cut to your desired size. It doesn't really change sizes, so when you cut it, that's what you get. So check what you're actually going to be using. Are you going to use it as a sandwich wrap? How big is your bread? Are you going to use it to cover a bowl? What size bowl? And that's the size that you need to go with. This is not one of those how-tos that's very precise. This is for my home use, and if you are doing this for use in your own home, make it how you want it and with the things that you have to fit a need that you have. So here's what we're going to do. We will cut this. Another thing that is really handy are these pinking shears. They are scissors that are designed to cut fabric. I don't know if you can see, but they're a little zigzagged. And that zigzag is cutting the fabric in a way that it does not have as much tendency to fray. So if I was not going to do that, I might want to cut and then hem my fabric so it wouldn't be fraying over time. But because I just need a plain piece of fabric, nothing fancy, I'm just going to use these shears to help the fabric not fray around the edges. I have also seen some people do this at the end with their finished product. I don't want to do that because these scissors are for fabric, and I know what happens to things when I use them with beeswax and pine rosin, and it is really difficult to clean those things off of anything. So if I can do that step beforehand, I'm going to avoid some unnecessary cleanup, which I am all about. So I'm going to measure and cut my fabric with the pinking shears. Then I'm going to melt all of my 3 ingredients, and I'm going to use the same method that I use a lot of times, and that is just a pot. I'm going to put water in this pot. This came with my Instant Pot, and it just allows me to set it down and create kind of a double boiler situation so that I don't overheat my ingredients. I want them to be hot and I want them to melt, but I don't want them sitting right on the burner where I'm going to damage anything. Then, on top of that, you can put a mason jar for your ingredients, that simple, or a glass or stainless steel container that will allow you to melt all the ingredients, and they're easy to clean. So I'm going to use my stainless steel one. And then I'm going to use the silicone brush to brush the liquid that I get at the end onto the fabric. I just used this for the same thing, and this is apparently going to be my Beeswax Wrap brush, because while beeswax is tough to clean, so is pine rosin, and I'm just not going to use it for food. It was really cheap. So I will put some links of where you can find some of these things down in the description. But you can get these at Walmart, anywhere that sells kitchen stuff, the silicone brushes. And I like the silicone because it's not like the bristle brushes that will leave pieces when you're using it. I like these. And then I have a little thing that came with my stainless steel melting kit. This actually came with a candle making kit. I have never used it for candles, but it works really well for melting anything with beeswax. So I'm going to use my stirrer. I'm going to put all my ingredients in here. For today, what I'm going to use, 1 cup of beeswax. Now, I would usually be using weight because some of the things that I use when I'm making lotion bars or chapstick or anything like that uses beeswax, sometimes I have larger chunks of things or smaller pieces or some mixture, and it's just easier if I do weight. I can be more specific. But this is not anything exact or precise. Now, in my last attempt, I used more like 6 tablespoons of pine rosin. Today I'm going to go down to 5, just a little bit less, and see how that works out. Now my jojoba oil, and this I'm going to put about 2 tablespoons. And this stuff is a little more expensive. If you don't want to use this or you want to use less, no big deal. Your fabric won't end up quite as soft, but it'll still work. All right, so now I have all of my ingredients in here. All I have to do is melt it, and then I'm going to show you how to apply it to the fabric. Let's do that. So the first thing I'm going to do is measure out some fabric. I broke out my quilting stuff. You don't need anything fancy. I used the kids' sidewalk chalk to mark where I wanted to cut my fabric. And I can leave you in the description the lengths and widths of what I made, but really make the size that fits what you need. Nothing more exact than that. You are going to want to cut all 4 sides of each piece with the pinking shears if you have them, to keep any of the edges from fraying. Now while I'm cutting, I do have this over here in the heat melting everything, but you're going to want to check on it pretty often and give it a little stir to really incorporate everything. Usually the parts around the edges are going to melt much more quickly, so you'll want to stir it frequently. And then once I've checked on the liquid, I'm going to go ahead and let that melt some more while I cut some more fabric to the size that I want. And then back to check on my melting liquid. It's even more melty now. You can see less pieces of the pine rosin in there and the beeswax. It's really starting to look good and liquidy. You'll want to stir to make sure the very middle is all liquid as well. And if you're doing a double boiler system like I am, you're going to want to be careful with that hot steam coming up. Sometimes I will blow the steam out of the way while I'm reaching my hand through to stir, and that helps just move that heat away from your hands for that minute while you're stirring. That can be helpful. And now I'm cutting my very last piece, one large square in my darker fabric. Now one way to do this is to put it in an old cookie sheet, something you don't mind getting something on it. Something sticky like pine rosin or beeswax is hard to clean off, but you can still use parchment paper to try to catch as much of it as possible. You want one layer of parchment paper and then lay your fabric on top of it. And it doesn't matter which side of the fabric is facing up. I'll show you here in just a minute why that is true. But you're just going to paint that liquid onto your fabric. Notice that I am starting in the center of the fabric and I'm painting outward. It does not have to be the same amount of liquid covering every single inch of the fabric. We're going to use an iron to even this out, but it really gives us a good head start if we can paint as much of the fabric as possible with the liquid. And you kind of have to hurry while you're doing this, because even moving it from the container to the fabric, it is already starting to harden and cool on the brush. So this is something that you're going to have to do fairly quickly. Now we're going to move that parchment paper with the fabric onto an ironing board. This is my crafting ironing board, so I'm okay with it getting a little bit of whatever on it. If it's not perfectly clean, I'm okay with that. So keep that in mind. Make sure you're using things that you're not going to be upset if it gets pine rosin or beeswax on it. You will have better luck if you make sure to have plenty of space around your fabric covered underneath and on top with parchment paper, because if there's not enough, you will squeeze out some of this liquid and it will end up getting on your iron or on your ironing board. This was especially tricky with my largest piece of fabric because there just wasn't that much room around it on the parchment paper for the size that I had. Also, the dark color, even though I had washed it maybe I should have washed it more than once, but the colors, as I ironed it, the color bled out a little bit and stained my ironing board. Again, I don't care, but you may want to pay attention to those things. You can use the cotton setting on your iron if there's a setting. You do not necessarily want steam because you don't want to add any water to this at this point. You just want to heat and remelt all of that you painted on there, the beeswax mixture. And you can see where it shows up under the parchment paper where it has melted, and you can see as I push down from in the center toward the outside, it is evenly distributing that. And I'm going to go really slowly because as it melts, it is soaking the fabric all the way through from front to back, as well as going from the center to all of the edges where I might have applied it a little more thinly. So it's going to be really even all throughout my fabric if I do it this way. You should be able to see if you just pick up your iron. If there are any places that still look dry, you can always peel that top parchment paper back, apply a little bit more of the liquid, and then put it back on and iron again to make sure it's really good and even. But when you are really finished, you can peel that top layer off and then just let this dry and cool for a few minutes. It's going to cool very quickly, and then it'll be ready to do whatever you want to with it. Of course, you're going to find that if you apply it a little too thickly, or if you don't have enough space between your fabric and the edge of your parchment paper, you will be pushing some of this liquid out, and as you can see, it stained my ironing board a little bit. It can really be difficult to clean off your iron if you're not careful. When this happens, I just get a few paper towels, and while my iron is really hot, I just wipe it off quickly and try to remove any residue while the iron is still really hot, making it the easiest to clean. Because if it cools and hardens on there, it's going to be really difficult to get off. And then the next time you go to iron things, if you are going to iron your clothes, it could put that residue onto your clothes, which might not be desirable. Each time that I've made this, it has turned out that the liquid goes farther than I think it will, and I'm quickly cutting more pieces of fabric, so have some of it handy in case you want to be able to use every last little bit of that liquid that you melted. And so have your pinking shears ready, have your fabric ready if you have extra. Also, I would not turn off your water in your double boiler, and you may need to remember to add water to it as it's boiling down. By the end of this process, and I made a whole bunch this time, my kitchen was so steamy and smelled very much of pine, so just be prepared. But especially as you get to the bottom, this liquid is going to start rehardening. So you're going to want to have that pot ready and available to set your container back down in it and remelt it so that you can continue using it. It was very steamy. After just a few minutes of sitting out, you will notice that your fabric is stiff where everything has hardened, and that's exactly as it should be. Especially this large one, I'm gonna just fold it. Everything's already ready to go on it. I could use this right now, but I'm gonna fold it so that it will fit better in the drawer where I want to put it. So pretty neat process, really a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. So we have enjoyed using them, and I'm really excited to share and see what other people think of this, but pretty excited about it. And it is that easy. I'm so excited to try these out and start including them as part of what we use in our kitchen on a regular basis. I think it'll be one really good way we can make a step towards being plastic free, one more step into lessening the toxins in our home, and I think they're really cute. So let us know if you try this out, or if you have before, if you have any tips, or how you use these beeswax wraps if you've used them before. We'd love to hear about your experiences in the comments. We are always excited about learning new things. So Thanks for watching and joining us here as we sew and grow together. And if you haven't already, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. We will catch you next time. Thanks, guys.